I'm going for my first bet, my best bet. I'm taking Boise State -3.5 against Oklahoma State. So the Boise State offense, obviously, it's 2 games in, has kind of looked like what we've expected out of the Boise State offense. Bachmeier's looks great, 603 yards, 4 touchdowns, just 1 pick in 2 games. Uh, Khalil Shakir is everything we thought he would be. 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been a monster. The two of them have this offense running. And the biggest thing I felt Boise State needed to improve, obviously, was their defense was solid last year, but they really struggled to force turnovers. And that was something when Andy Avalos came over from Oregon, he said he wanted the defense to be more aggressive. They forced 3 turnovers all season last year. They already have 8 through 2 games. So that pretty much like, hey, that's what I needed to see. Boom. I've seen it. And then the Oklahoma State side, maybe this is a little bit of personal bias because I feel like every time I bet on Oklahoma State, they lose, usually in horrific fashion. But I don't think Spencer Sanders is good at all. And he's someone who struggles with turnovers his whole career. He's got 19 interceptions. He's fumbled 12 times in the last 2 years. Even last week, he fumbled twice. They did recover him, but, he's very careless with the ball. And if you watched him a lot last year, like I did, he's a totally different quarterback when Tylan Wallace was out or Chuba Hubbard was hurt. If the game is on Sanders' shoulders, they ain't winning it. So, the fans were already chanting for Shane Ellenworth to come in, who, that would actually make me a little more nervous about this bet. But I think Boise State, their offense could have no problem. I mean, Oklahoma State defense looked improved last year, but Rodarius Williams is gone. He was kind of their mainstay in the back end. So I trust this Boise State offense a lot more than the Oklahoma State offense. And from what I've seen from Boise State's defense, being able to force turnovers and play more aggressive, I'm really impressed. Oklahoma State's going up to the Smurf turf. I'll lay the 3.5 with Boise State here.
There's a lot to like about this Boise State team, whether it's Bachmeier, who's taken all but one snap this year, or even Jack Sears coming in off the bench. The passing game is living up to the lofty expectations. My only concern is the running game has just not been there, sub 3 yards per carry this season. But I agree with you. Oklahoma State, they just seem to be a little bit dysfunctional offensively when Spencer Sanders is calling the shots. And there's not necessarily a star player to turn to in the ways that really, dating back to 2014, they've always had a player to go to, a dynamic skill position, from the James Washingtons to, you mentioned in Wallace and Chuba Hubbard. They've had these guys to bail them out and to get those explosive plays. And I just don't see it this year. I think they're efficient offensively at best, but certainly not explosive. So I like that one. I'm going to go with really a G5 team and almost in name only because they're out the door to play in the Big 12 very soon. And that is the Cincinnati Bearcats. Luke Fickell also getting his name bandied about to potentially hopping on that USC job opening. But just a little insider tip here, if you're thinking about betting the futures for who USC hires, he has multiple kids. I think he's got 4 or 5, maybe 6 kids. And he's been a Midwestern guy his entire life. And I think the idea of moving everybody to Los Angeles could be something, just a bridge too far for him in this spot. I know it's going to be transformational money. I know it's an opportunity to coach one of the elite blue bloods in the history of college football. But Cincinnati has now played their way into an established top 15 program. They're top 10 this season. If everything goes right and they win out, they're going to be in the college football playoff potentially. And then with the Big 12 extending the offer, I think it's more likely that he's going to hold out for a dream job maybe in the Midwest as opposed to leaving Cincinnati. But getting down to brass tacks for this particular game against Indiana is just, I during the preseason wrote extensively that I believe that Indiana was a paper tiger. When you look at the teams they beat last year, they only beat one with a winning record, and it was a 4-3 Wisconsin team that was totally dysfunctional offensively due to COVID losses. And this year, they needed Michael Penix Jr. to be the kind of guy he was pre-injury. And I hate to pile on the guy, particularly playing through an injury and coming back so quickly. I think just historically, the timetable on these ACL injuries has shrunk so dramatically that we just say, oh, he had it 7 months ago, he'll be fine. That's just not the way that it works necessarily. And it's clear that he can't push the ball down the field. And what our defense is doing, they're coming to the line of scrimmage. And it wasn't just Iowa who pants them in that opener. Even against Idaho, he couldn't push the ball down the field. And when I look at the Cincinnati defense, this is a special defense. I think in the end, they're going to have 2 first-round NFL draft picks. And because of that, I think they're going to put the clamps on this Hoosier offense. So the question is, can Desmond Ridder get you 24 points or more? I feel comfortable in that spot. I think he's going to be able to do it, particularly when you look at his performances in the last 2 years against ranked opponents. He's played up. they've sleptwalked through a few games, whether it's Murray State or, some teams on their schedule like USF last year. They didn't put their foot down on the accelerator. I don't think they're going to have any problem doing that in a game that, yes, Indiana's down, but they are a Power 5 opponent. This is an opportunity to get a pelt, put it up on their wall, to be able to impress the college football playoff committee. And there's no look ahead factor for me with Notre Dame 2 weeks away with that bye week in between. What do you think about Cincy in this spot?
I love it, and I agree with everything you said. I think I bet Indiana's win total under. Totally agreed. If you look at their games last year, as a completely unbiased journalist, they should have lost to Penn State. Penix was down. Let's just call a spade a spade. He was down. He was out of bounds. And even look at the expected box score. It's like Penn State should have won that, had like a 95% expected win percentage at the end of that game. And that was the case of, a lot of Indiana games. They really relied on just turnover luck defensively. And, Kane Womack's now gone. He took the head coach job at Southern Miss, so that they lost their DC. And everything you said is that Cincinnati, their offense is just, they're not, they're never going to be known for their offense. But, Ritter's on his 4th, 5th season. He's consistent. He's great with his legs and his arm. And that Cincinnati defense, they are going to dial up the blitz on Penix, and he really struggles under pressure. He has his entire career. And when he's able to get it out, they have 2 of the best corners in college football with Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant. So I think Penix is really going to struggle against the Cincinnati defense. And to your point, all offseason, when all the national talk about, does Cincinnati have a chance? The whole storyline is they got to beat Indiana and Notre Dame. These are the only 2 games that matter to Cincinnati, is Indiana and Notre Dame. So, they know they're going to pretty much walk through the rest of their schedules. They have to smack Indiana, and I think they're going to be ready for it, and I think they're going to smack them. And to your point, too, about Luke Fickell, just to kind of jump on that, I agree with you completely he doesn't make sense for USC. He makes sense for USC. USC doesn't make sense for him. If you watch him in like post-game interviews, he hates everything not related to football and on the field. Remember last year that, a group of 5 teams and fans were pleading with Fickell to try to make his team's case for the playoff. And he refused to politic for his team at all. He's like, hey, whatever they decide, they decide. It's like, buddy, you got to make a stronger case and try to help your team. He didn't care about that. He's like, we're just here to play football. Whatever happens, happens. You can't do that at USC. You're in Hollywood. You got to promote your team. You got to do a little, you have to have some swag and, do some talking and some politicking. And he's not going to want to do that. So I don't think he would want that job at all, because just everything that job comes with off the field, he would hate. So I totally agree with you that I don't see his fit there. And especially now Cincinnati going to the Big 12, why would he bother?
All right, just to put a nice cap on our best bets, we actually have 4 this week. So one more from you, Ianniello, and then I'll come in over the top.
Yeah, I'm going to go with over 50.5 in Nevada, Kansas State. I know, some people might be scared away by the loss of Skylar Thompson, but Will Howard started most of last year, and they were 23rd in the country in explosiveness last year under Howard. So I think, it's a little bit of a step down, but I still trust Howard. And I think if anything, this number is probably just lower because you don't have Thompson. Howard averaged 7 yards per attempt last year. He's able to use his legs. And Kansas State has Deuce Vaughn, who, if you guys haven't watched Deuce Vaughn, he is a human highlight reel. He can break a 70-yard carry just about on any touch. So he led the Big 12 last year with 16 plays of 20-plus yards. He already had a 59-yard touchdown run week 1. So you have the explosiveness on the Kansas State side. And then obviously the Nevada side, Carson Strong, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He's already thrown for 693 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2 games. They've got talent all over the place. Romeo Dubs, they have the speedster Torrey Horton, who averages 25 yards per catch this year. So yeah, give me the over in that game. 2 teams that can put up points quickly. I like the over 50 between Nevada, Kansas State.
I'll just make one quick note on that because I've got burned on this in the past. You always want to check the winds, when playing in, the Little Apple out there in Manhattan, Kansas, because, Nevada is going to rely so heavily on Carson Strong and to get that passing game going. So just make sure that it's nothing, let's say, in excess of 14 miles an hour. The Action Network labs allow you to play with different tools, and they always point out that, totals take a nosedive when wind is at 15 miles an hour or higher. So just something to keep an eye on. To close out the best bets for me, I like Iowa minus 22 against Kent State. And this one's pretty simple. Kent State is a team that has been bullied by Power 5 competition over the years. They ran up some huge numbers last year in a MAC only schedule. 22 really caught my eye here because they were a 29.5-point underdog at Texas A&M. It took a bit of a gambling miracle to get that cover. But when I look at the Iowa defense, particularly in the pass defense department, this is the best pass defense in the country for my money. When you look at what they did to Iowa State had to look at Brock Purdy, who's been starting forever for them, and say, all right, it's time for you to sit down. We don't want to ruin your confidence. That's how bad you were playing against this Iowa defense and how bad they're making us look, offensively. I think it's going to be a struggle for Kent State to score more than 10 points in this game. And when I think about Kirk Ferentz and what he has done offensively. Yes, they're vanilla. Yes, they want to play ball control, and sometimes that can scare bettors off of a larger number like this in excess of 3 touchdowns. But I think this is a feel-good game for Spencer Petras to get involved in the passing game, to get up his stats a little bit. And from a running game perspective, the reason why I loved A&M so much a couple of weeks ago is that they were able to run through, by, around, whatever you want, that Golden Flash defense. When I look at Spin Shady, as some have called Tyler Goodson this year, I think he's going to go for a huge game, and I don't think there's any chance that Kent State can slow him down, particularly last week. They get a feel-good game against Virginia Military Institute, and they still gave up, I think, like 150 yards on the ground. So this defense just lining up 11 on 11 is overmatched against anyone in the run game. So I like Iowa here. What do you think about the Hawkeyes? And now that they're in the top 5 nationally, is there any chance of a letdown spot here against a MAC opponent?
I'm not sold on Iowa yet, just because I think their offense has looked atrocious. I definitely am going to pick some spots to fade Iowa, but I don't necessarily think this is it for the reason you laid out on. So I'm fine laying the points with the Hawkeyes here. Like I said, I will fade them down the road. This is another one of those Kent State backdoor specials, but hey, it worked out for you last time. And at the end of the day, if Kent State has to kick a field goal to cover the spread late, you should feel pretty confident with your Iowa bet. So again, the Kent State, that offense, how fast they play, it always makes you nervous with the back door, but it worked last time. So I don't fault you at all for taking it again.